Hello everyone, welcome back to another build evolution. Today I have another weather glass build. It looks a lot different than the first video we covered on weather glass, but I think this highlights an important part of the bazaar where not every run is going to be exactly cookie cutter. You have to adapt and flow with the game. So I want to start this one with a little bit of a different format. I'm going to go with a decision I made throughout the day, and then I'm going to show the final build for that day just to kind of help with like the progression of my decisions. So here, my day one was a little bit like mediocre. I couldn't find a lot of synergy. You can see I'm playing like a seaweed, a pesky Pete, and some slow items. So instead of going for the skill, which I definitely prefer, I took a little bit of a gamble to get the enchanted item, and this pays off pretty well here because I see a toxic lighter. There's a heavy bayonet and a toxic the reload item. But the Toxic Lighter is insanely strong early. I mean, just getting a little bit of poison in addition to the burn is super helpful. But I'm also kind of thinking in the back of my mind, like, well, Weather Glass needs a burn item and a poison item to enable its multicast, and this is covering both of those. So I'm going to take the lighter, and then on the final board, I'm just playing a little bit of fill here. The lighter plus the jellyfish are going to be stacking some poison. Seaweed's just going to get a little bit of heal, but um, I wasn't super confident in winning this fight, but I did catch the win, which was pretty awesome. So in day two, I pulled this image because we go to the medium shop, definitely looking for like aquatic vents, life preserver, something to help kind of clear out the filler items and move more into this burn and or poison centric build. But I highlighted this because the dock lines is, in my opinion, a very strong item. And so I picked it up. And also in the back of my mind, it's a slow item that enables the weather glass as well. But the dock line does a really good job of disrupting the enemy. So that helps when you're trying to stack poison and burn. So then the final build looks like this. It basically we're just getting the dock lines in. I found a skill during the day that gives me a loot item at the start of each day, so that's going to be kind of nice. It has the potential chance of buffing poison or burn. So moving on to day three, um, it wasn't really exciting. You can see we're on the final hour here, and our board actually hasn't changed a whole lot. We didn't really get any good skills. Not a ton of upgrades to talk about, but I'm highlighting this because the incendiary rounds here is a really good item to just stash and hold. That's a skill that you'll have in the bazaar is knowing what items to put in your stash and hold for later because this incendiary rounds right now is really weak, but knowing that later in the game it'll be really strong when you can put it next to an item with multicast, or you can just give it more burn, or you can scale its burn. It turns into an absolute powerhouse. All right, so on day three, our final board ends up looking a little bit like this. Again, it's just a little bit of a mess. It's not all coming together, but because we kind of have three different themes going on. We have a burn theme, we have a poison theme, and then we have a slow theme. But there's not really any payout for any of those. So definitely kind of low on my enthusiasm right now, but just kind of like needing to know that I need to kind of piece it together in the next coming days is important. So on day four, I wanted to point this shop out because there isn't anything in here that like screams the same theme, but this musket here is an incredibly strong item in the early game, and I can put it next to some of my burn items to scale the damage, and it'll keep reloading. So I'm actually gonna pick it up just to use as filler for the meantime to kind of help just like keep my tempo going and to keep winning fights while I try to assemble something that's more synergistic. So the musket comes in on the board. I put it in between the two burn items because whenever you use an adjacent item that burns, it scales its damage and reloads. Hasting the lighter and the pesky Pete, got the dock lines in. At this point, these three items right here, the bolas, the jellyfish, and the pesky Pete, they're not doing a whole lot. I would love to replace them, but keep that in mind for the upcoming days. We got a crit skill, which is really, just generally good. Won't really complain with that. All right, so we won that last fight. Moving on, I highlighted this decision because it kind of comes up a lot, and the essence of the decision is the Gorgon Noble here. She will drop a ticket, the Temple ticket, which is a really easy way to get 10 wins in your run. There's a lot of really powerful items that come out of that, and plus you get so much gold and loot items. Or we could take the Infernal Envoy, or this middle guy here, and the rationale for him is that there's a lot of burn synergistic items. Like you're more likely to get an item that benefits you now versus like gambling to get an item that will help you later. Now, she also has a lot of good poison items, but I was feeling like I wanted to go with the fire guy because I felt like a claw would be really good to replace these three items. He also has just good skills in general. So um, I definitely could see both sides of the argument because the poison lady has poison synergistic stuff and a temple ticket, whereas the burn guy has burn centric stuff. So I think both clicks are good. I mean, I think we beat both of them pretty easily. All right, so going into day five, board actually doesn't really change a whole lot from day four. We are just gonna, rip the fight. So end up winning that fight. And I wanted to highlight here the recap of the fight. So the musket here did 475 damage. So it's almost half of this Vanessa's life. And that's why I picked it up on day four, is it just is so powerful. It eventually falls off, but it's doing enough to help me in these early days where I don't feel like my board's very strong, but this singular item is helping me win days 4 and 5. So very, very much worth the gold. The poison lighter, 40 burn, 45 poison, like that's awesome at this stage of the game. This 2 slow from the Ray, the 12 burn from the Pete, and the 80 damage and only 2 slow from the Bolas, like these are looking like the items that I need to replace. So I'm keeping that in the back of my mind for the upcoming days. All right, now we get here, and it's you could go to the medium shop and try to upgrade the dock lines in the musket, or you can go to Sterling and get a guaranteed upgrade. So I wanted to highlight this because it's like, well, what do we upgrade? There's actually a lot of good upgrades in my opinion here. The musket, if you upgrade the musket, you're very much likely winning the next fight, maybe even day 7, but it's not going to be on your final board. The lighter would just be an upgrade, but upgrading lighter doesn't do a whole lot. Upgrading Zorsid reduces its cooldown by 1 second, which is really strong. It just helps getting the lighter to cast more and the pesky Pete to cast more. And the Docklines upgrade adds an additional item that it slows. And here I took the Dockline upgrade because I felt like getting 3 items slowed for 3 seconds is just going to let my burn and my musket scale up. And I could see myself playing the Docklines for the rest of the game. Now, we know that this build eventually turns into Weatherglass, but there is absolutely an angle here or a line that I could go into that's slow centric. If we find a lighthouse, if we find a cauterizing blade, if we find Kusarigama, like there's a lot of items that slow would pay off for. And I felt like this item would go in both builds. So I upgraded the one that I could see that helps in like whatever direction I go. All right. So day 6, I took a rest event, as you can see with my shield here. I wanted to make sure I just got this win and got out of here because, again, I didn't get to replace these 3 items that I really want to replace. The shield definitely comes in handy, and I was able to win that fight. All right, I highlighted this choice here on day 7. It's either taking the tool vendor or going for the random encounter. The random encounter is the one that you can roll on, so you can kind of keep seeing more and more encounters. And you kind of just have to ask yourself, well, if I were to get the tool vendor from this, would I just take it? And the answer to me is yes. The weather glass comes from the tool vendor. The lighter is a tool. The dock lines is a tool. There's dive weights, which is a tool. There's really a lot of good tools when you're playing this variation of the Vanessa burn line and slow line. So I just take the tool vendor to not have to really gamble on seeing a different event from the reroll event here. All right, so day 7, my board actually changes a good amount. The tool vendor did give me the weather glass, so that was really, really exciting. I'm just going to highlight, or I'm just going to go back, sorry. you can kind of see we were playing the musket as the carry item, and then we had these three really bad items. But day 7 was an absolute blessing where the tool vendor, we were able to get a dive weights, we were able to get a weather glass, and we also got this tripwire from a different event. Now, I put the tripwire in because on day 7, it's just going to slow them a lot. In addition to the dock lines, like we're really halting their synergy of their builds. The weather glass is benefiting from the burn on the lighter and the poison, and then the slows here, so it's getting its multicast. The Sorcid is going to be hasting the weather glass and the lighter. I put the weather glass next to the incendiary rounds with a dive weights next to it. So incendiary rounds next to a dive weight is really strong. Dive weights will cast 5 times. Now at 1 burn, it's not necessarily the most powerful thing in the world, right? You're going to get 5 burn off that. But the 4 multicast from the weather glass means that this guy's going to do like 9 burn every time these guys go off. So it's good enough to include right now, and it's definitely better than the other items in my stash. Definitely worth pointing out that I picked up this skill during the run. The skill makes it so that whenever you use a burn item, it gains 1 additional burn. So that's really solid with Weather Glass because Weather Glass will cast 4 times, and each time it casts, you're going to get 1 burn from it. The incendiary rounds unfortunately doesn't benefit from that, but nonetheless, this is just really supporting the Weather Glass. Okay, I threw up the game recap here because our build changed drastically. The tripwire did 20 slow triggers. The dockline did 12 slow triggers. So, this person's board was just at a halt. Dive weights went off once. The incendiary rounds did 13 burn. So, really weak, honestly, between these two items. It's possible that they could have been replaced. Weather glass did 68 burn and 36 poison. And I wanted to show this screenshot because the lighter did more burn and more poison, which to me was a little bit wild. It might have crit a couple of times. We do have the crit skill down here. But that is sort of the situation going on here. Okay, day 8, we have a Stealth Vendor, Artisan Dunes, and the decision for me here was I was always going Artisan Dunes, but it's do you pay 15 gold to buff up your burn items? And so with incendiary rounds only being at 1 burn, it going to 3 burn is just, we're getting 5 triggers here and 4 triggers here. So the additional burn is worth 9 burn. So I had a little bit of extra gold in the stash, and I was like, all right, well, doubling the burn helps the lighter, which helps the poison, which helps the weather glass, which helps the incendiary rounds. So I'm getting a lot of strength from this event, and I'm using the gold to help, progress my build further, my strength. So when we get to the fight here, due to the Artisan Dunes plus a loot item, my incendiary rounds is now at 7 burn, so it should be doing a lot more than it did in our previous fight. All right, so then we go to day 9, we level up to 10, we get our 2 enchants. There's definitely an argument to put the poison on the weather glass, to put the poison on the incendiary rounds, maybe even the tripwire. And there's also the argument to put the radiant on the weather glass, or even maybe the dive weights. So when I have these decisions, I like to think like, okay, well, what would weather glass with radiant do? What would weather glass with poison do? What would the incendiary rounds with poison do? And just kind of like playing it through my mind. Here, I felt like the weather glass with the poison isn't going to get as much benefit because it's not scaling poison, it's scaling burn. So like if it had a burned enchant, this would be a no-brainer. But the fact that it's a poison enchant, it's not going to be, in my mind, as beneficial. So I decided to put the poison on the incendiary rounds because if we ever up the burn of the incendiary rounds, the poison will follow suit. In addition, it's this thing did about 100 burn in the last fight, so we're adding 100 poison to the build, which is a good solid bit of DPS. All right, when we move on to the fight for day 9, you can see we got the poison now on the incendiary rounds. Not a whole lot else changed, but the poison on this definitely helped win this fight. So I'm just gonna take a brief pause. So we're on day 10 and we have 8 wins. So we have 8 out of 9 wins. The Weather Glass, I mean, I have it as silver right now. It's a very powerful mid-game item. It doesn't necessarily scale super strong into the late game. So I'm really focused right now on making sure I win my next two fights. But with this decision here, I wanted to point it out because the Bounty Hunters is one of my favorite events for Vanessa. You get an XP just by clicking it, and then the monster can give you 4 XP if you kill it. So you're gaining 5 experience for one event, which is, a ludicrous amount of experience. I end up taking it, I beat the fight, and so when we get to our next fight, we're over leveled, which is, it gives you a benefit in having additional health. But this day was also nuts because I end up having a diamond weather glass. You know, the previous day I had a silver one, and then in day 10 I was able to not only find, I believe, a sterling to get it to a gold. I went to a tool shop and got the weather glass to make it diamond. So 2 seconds less of a cooldown on this weather glass. The rest of the board is really the same. However, due to the additional 2 seconds being reduced from the weather glass, it just destroyed that fight. So really happy. I just need one more win to kind of get out of here. I go to a medium shop and I see a diamond rowboat. And this is like an awesome, awesome pickup. Diamond rowboat charges the 2 adjacent items 2 seconds. So it's just going to assist with getting more weather glass procs off, which in turn will get the Zorsid going. Or I'm sorry, the incendiary rounds. The reason I said Zorsid was I'm going back a second. I didn't realize this, but I mispositioned going into this fight. Um, at some point during the day, I moved my items around and I moved the weather glass to the right and the Zorsid to the left. This weather glass needs to be next to the incendiary rounds, and the Zorsid needs to be buffing the not. The Zorsid giving haste to an item which has no cooldown is atrocious. So this was a blunder. I'm lucky I won. Being over level helped, but it's a mistake. So picking up the rowboat, the question is well, what do you replace? And so I was thinking, at this point in the game, the tripwire, in my opinion, becomes less and less valuable. So I'm going to take the rowboat and replace the tripwire with it. The reasoning behind that is I feel like early in the game, there's longer cooldowns, things are going off, and you're slowing them. Like them getting used, they need to go off multiple times to be effective, so you will get multiple triggers from it. But the later in the game, sometimes the items only go off like once or twice, so you're not really getting as much value from the tripwire. Now, looking back on this, I need to win this fight, and I kind of played this part of the game fast, and it cost me. The the situation here is that the rowboat, I'm charging the dock lines and the dive weights, and I didn't even think to charge my weather glass. The rowboat should be in between the weather glass and the lighter, and the Zorsid should be moved over here. Um, this fight was an impossible fight. This guy had a really, really, really strong board, so I don't think this mistake cost me this fight, but it's still worth noting that you really need to get your wins, and in order to get your wins, you have to position correctly. So should have had the rowboat in between these two items. So day 12, we got the monster skill guy. I have a choice here between a rigged, gold rigged, or getting the ambush upgraded to gold. The argument would be that 10% more health just off the enemy just right away. That's great, but I mean they could regen it, they could shield. It's not just like a guaranteed 20%. But rigged is, in my opinion, insanely strong. It just means that when one of your items is used, you haste all your other items for 2 seconds. So I took the rigged. However, I could see a world in which the ambush is better. It's just hard for me to tell. But I like getting everything off faster. All right, so going into day 12, I'm fighting an opponent. We're still mispositioning the rowboat, and I think this is where it does cost me this fight. So not a whole lot changed. I got Moth to a Flame for my diamond level up, which is, you gain regen equal to the amount of burn. So you can see that the rowboat not getting more burn on uh, the weather glass in addition to the triggers on the incendiary rounds, in addition to the lighter. I'm losing additional burn, I'm losing regen. It's just this being in between the weather glass and lighter is a massive deal. I wanted to highlight the fight here because it doesn't necessarily show it, but I had the opponent down to 500 health, so I was one burn tick away from killing them before I died. And the rowboat, I think, would have changed that. So, that could have got me my 10th win, and we would be out of here. We don't have to rely on getting to another day because the weather glass is falling off. I want to win and get out. All right, day 13. We did end up picking an enchant up on the weather glass. It's critical strike, so that made me happy that I didn't take the poison on it earlier in the round because the crit's going to actually scale the burn, which is benefiting from all my skills. So I was really happy to find the crit on the weather glass. I chose this because it's um, a situation where I could go to the vendor, but the vendor only has medium items, and all my medium items are fully upgraded. So it's it feels maybe like a basic decision, but just going for the temporary health. We have one last fight. It's a good time to take the temporary health, especially because we have a ton of it, and the percentage based is going to give us more health than if it was earlier in the days. Okay, last fight, I did move the rowboat. I saw it, and I was kicking myself. But ultimately, this is a good weather glass build, and it's super strong. It's tough to win in the late days. I ended up losing this fight, and I only got 9 wins on this run. I still think it was important to highlight, though, because it shows that weather glass is a tempo build, and I was not able to find anything to scale this harder, meaning I didn't find anything that could increase the burn on the incendiary rounds nor the weather glass. So I needed to win early, and mispositioning the rowboat was detrimental to that. So here's the final run. Overall, I think it was really good. Just that one little misplay at the end did cost me the 10 wins. But outside of that, thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned a little bit, and I'll see you guys on the next one.